Silver Jubilee are finally completed. A very celebratory weekend in the UK. Congratulations to all the British people enjoying that. It is Monday morning. Oil markets are open in Asia. Brent is up. It's broken back through that $120 level after sort of closing below it last week. It sort of climbed up the mountain early in the week last week and sort of dropped back away and then up again. Let's kick off this morning, as always, with our Monday morning quarterback, Omar Najia, Global Head of Derivatives at BB Energy. Omar, I'd welcome your insights on the decision overnight. The Saudi Arabia OSPs are being published, and the sort of general narrative from the media reporting, at least, is that they're surprisingly high going into Asia. Your thoughts on that, technically as well as otherwise?
So, OSPs are physical crude, and physical crude trades, let's say, about 100 million barrels a day. That's world demand. And what actually trades that is maybe like 20% actually physically trades. The rest is just, going from A to B always. So I don't really look at what OSPs are doing, because my market trades 2 billion barrels a day, as opposed to 20 million. So I really don't mind what they do with the OSPs. They can go up or down, I don't care. So no view. But I think basically the market's breaking out. I think we're going higher. I think the Americans tried releasing SPR. They tried talking to OPEC. They're now apparently going to do something with Iran. So what I suggest is that it is not just desperation, but a clearly big time, panic stations, and they're not getting what they want, and I don't think they're going to get what they want, and I think the market's going to go considerably higher, and I think winter's coming, and I think everything's going to go higher. I think the U.S. economy, I don't see it as basically going into recession because of all the money, and I think the Fed isn't doing anything to do with raising interest rates, by 0.5% or whatever it is. So in general, commodity prices skyrocket. The Ukraine narrative that they're winning and all the rest of it falls apart. And the fact that, quote unquote, sanctions will hurt Russia, again, falls apart. And we'll see what happens. But I think higher on oil, higher on gas prices as well.
Let's welcome Sarah Akbar, Chairperson and CEO of Oilserve Kuwait and Non-Executive Director at Petrofac. Sarah, the OPEC Plus meeting last week delivered a little bit of a surprise, although it was flagged in the days leading up to it. But nonetheless, OPEC finally kind of adjusted this sort of locked-in agreement they've been on for quite some time. Your thoughts on the aftermath of that OPEC agreement, that OPEC decision to raise supply, or at least bring it forward a little bit in response to the demand outlook?
Good morning, Sean. I think we all realize that something has to be done, and finally, I think the alliance with Russia, the continuation of the status quo was not possible. Don't forget, the end of this month, Biden is visiting, and the main reason for Biden's visit is to try to push this part of the world to produce more in order to control this skyrocketing price, as Omar was saying. So I think this is all preparation for Biden's visit to the region. And, if you come now to all these NOCs in this part of the world, they are all pushing so hard. We don't believe how much they are pushing to maximize production. It was a long time, that I remember that people were looking for 10 barrels here, 10 barrels there. But that's the current situation, that they are pushing all the fields to the limits, trying their best to maximize production so that they can produce more, so that they can help in easing this price. And I think there is a political drive behind this as well. But
would that include Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, obviously, but also the UAE, which are generally regarded as still having idle capacity?
Well, I wonder if there is still idle capacity anywhere. I don't think anyone has any additional barrel that they are not trying to produce at this point in time. Everybody's pushing so hard, and I think all the barrels are out there now. There isn't any barrels hidden still. So the situation is really, really tight. And I think unless something happens with Russia, where Russia can bring more production or some kind of acceptable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, the oil price is not going to settle.
Let's welcome Neil Atkinson in Paris, former head of oil markets division at the International Energy Agency. Neil, while Omar is not too concerned about the outlook for Saudi OSPs, I suspect Asian refiners are, and wondering, oh my goodness, how's our bill going back up again? Ooh, those Russian discounted barrels look quite attractive. Your thoughts on the Saudi decision? Of course, typically other Gulf producers follow. I think you're on mute, Neil. Yep. Neil. Yep. You're still on mute. Neil?
Gotcha. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem.
My
Okay.
apologies.
You heard the question?
I got what you said. Now,
Okay.
yeah, the Saudis have raised the prices to Asia. The main reason behind that is their judgment is that Asian demand growth is fairly robust. China is going to come back out of lockdown, and we'll have to see what the pace of their re-entry into normal demand patterns is. And so they've made a judgment that the increases aren't that dramatic, but they are increases nonetheless at a time when, as you suggest, there could well be competition into the Asian market from Russian barrels that are displaced from Europe. So it's a fine judgment as far as the Saudis are concerned. And their pricing policy will evolve over the next few weeks as we see the evidence of how strong the Asian recovery is. Yeah, sure, Asian refiners won't like paying more. That makes perfect sense. Just very quickly before we lose the point about the spare capacity issue, that Mrs. Akbar made some very interesting remarks there, which I think will doubtless be picked up quite widely. And I do share her view that to some extent the available spare capacity that we keep talking about with respect to leading Middle Eastern producers is perhaps not as much as people like to think. That can actually be put into the field straight away. But the great point about this is people keep urging them to produce more, use this alleged idle capacity. Well, you can do that, but if you do that, there is therefore now no longer any spare capacity left. There is nowhere else to turn if there is to be some kind of further emergency or other issue. So I think it's perhaps understandable because of the political pressures that certain leaders are under. But we've got to get used to the fact that there is not a huge reservoir of spare capacity out there that can be drawn down on request, and that's a fact of life.
Omar, just looking at the paper markets, obviously you referenced there 2 billion barrels or whatever the number is a day traded, but also the amount of money that is moving into the paper markets or not, open interest as it's called. What does the flows on that look like now as the equity markets and others seem to get squeezed in this current cycle? Are you seeing bigger flows? What's your outlook in terms of money coming into the commodities and obviously into the oil derivatives market?
Well, I mean, prices are going up, so they must be buying, right? The market is very financialized anyway, which is why it trades so big. But the other point basically is imagine, Biden now coming to whoever and wanting to make any kind of political deal, right? Clearly, I mean, the odds are very, very strong that they're going to lose so badly in the coming congressional elections that why would I do anything with Biden? I just wait for, the next guy to come along. So I'm, apart from, spare capacity and Saudi Arabia, I mean, these, everybody can spike, but produce consistently, I think is a very different kind of thing. And then you have, problems with Libya, you have a million and one things. But again, I mean, it's desperation, and the market can smell it. And I think the
just
market's
looking at the technical side of that, or in terms of, we saw last week that pop up to 123 on Brent, obviously a little bit behind on WTI. Where are some of those technical breakers where that sort of breakthrough resistance levels, maybe we came back away from it, now we're going back towards it again? What do you think needs to break through to get to another level and so forth?
Okay, so we already broke through 116, 117. The next thing that comes along is the 130 high. I think they take that out, and I think basically WTI aims for, anything around 150, 160. You've got to make this market, you've got to make everybody scream. You've got to make this market kind of, scream. And then it'd be time not to be long anymore. But everybody's very kind of, relaxed. So last week, people were telling me on this show that, well, maybe we go up, maybe we don't. Last week, it was, China, no. And the week before that, well, we're going to get more oil and I don't know what, and blah, blah, blah. Demand's not going to be there. So all that, you've got to get all those people who are not bullish, you've got to get them all bullish. When they all get bullish, when everybody is bullish, everybody wants to buy, that'll be the time. So we're a little bit far away from that. So I think considerably higher. I think we have an existential war between East and West. It's not going to get settled. Not this year. Not in 10 years. I mean, you need to read what people are saying, like Lavrov, and that. Never, ever. So Europe coming into winter is going to suffer big time, like massively. The euro is going to come off a lot. Oil prices, gas prices, the GBP is going to go down, big time as well. You're going to get massive tax increases. It's going to be a huge, big problem. It's all coming. Like I said, 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks ago.
Jamie Dimon described his outlook as a hurricane. It sounds like you're describing a tsunami with a hurricane.
Yeah, so I said a long time ago, it's a tsunami. People don't see it. It's coming. The wave is coming. People just, look out and they say, everything's fine. It's coming. You're going to see fundamental changes about how the world is run.
Let's get Sarah's view on that. Sarah, you mentioned there in your earlier comment that the decision by OPEC Plus last week, obviously there wasn't articulated as such, but I think I'd welcome your further analysis on where it leaves the Russian Saudi axis within OPEC Plus, and where Biden coming to the region, which you mentioned. Can all those three coexist in the same kitchen, or how do you see it playing out? You're on mute, Sarah. Sorry.
Yeah. So this is my own interpretation of the situation. Unless there is a settlement or some kind of real progress in the Russian-Ukrainian front, where the West accepts the three terms that Russia wants. Russia wants three things. They want recognition of Crimea being part of them. They want a neutral Ukraine, and they want some kind of independence for the eastern part of Ukraine. So until we arrive to a situation where part of these requests by Russia are accepted and there is a settlement for the Ukrainian issue, I don't think the oil business anywhere can settle. And what Omar was saying is a reality. You will be pushing the boundaries of price further and further, because if we still try to squeeze Russia out, you will end up in this situation. So, and none of these, being Biden or being people in Europe, nobody wants to get to that kind of world. So there has to be a settlement. Now, for our part of the world, for Saudi, for Kuwait, so far they tried their best to play neutral and to align themselves both with Russia and the US, I really don't know if this can continue with the pressures that are really mounting from the US. They are pushing the region to take side, but they really can't. So I think this game will actually continue until
But
there is.
why not is the question. Why can't it? Why would you say they can't? Ultimately, what's left in the deal? OPEC plus, everybody's pumping at their maximum, as you say. The market's going up. Omar's indicating it's going to be going up for a long time. There's supply constraints everywhere. What's in a deal between OPEC plus that keeps Russia and Saudi so close? Why would it be difficult to divorce?
Yeah, but it is not only about the OPEC and the deal. It's about really positioning ourselves in this world of conflict. So it is not just about the oil market. It's about us not being party to this conflict between Russia and the West. We don't want to be in the middle. And that's why we have been resisting as Middle East to take sides. Now, how long can we stay on this pace where we do not take side and we continue the pace of trying to be walking on the edge? I really don't know. No, it will be apparent after this visit from Biden. But look, we kind of lost faith in what Russia and the US can do simply because look what's happening to Ukraine. They are in war and this, and they are only giving them some ammunition here, some help there, but they are kind of left to their own fate with Russia. So we don't want to be in that position. People are watching this and saying, oh, is it a good idea to align ourselves with this party or that party? Not really. We have no interest in this war, and we should be neutral to the last. So we don't want to antagonize Russia, but at the same time, we don't want to antagonize the US. So that's why we are working on this really egg, trying to play this.
Sounds like more than eggs shells. I think we're on broken glass at this stage. Neil Atkinson. Neil, your thoughts on the more fundamentals of the market? Obviously, Europe also made the decision last week to go ahead with this oil blockade or boycott, I suppose is probably a more accurate word, on some of the Russian oil, at least the start of that process. The market's still very tight. We also have refineries in full capacity mode, it seems. Your outlook for that European oil boycott and the sort of peak demand season of the summer?
Well, yeah, the European boycott has finally been agreed, with the exceptions that we all know about for some of the landlocked countries in Central Europe, who essentially have no realistic choice other than continue to take Russian oil. You can argue that by the standards of the European Union, this has been a very impressive response. To come up with this unified response that they have done. However, as Omar was suggesting, as we move through the summer, the peak demand season and towards the winter, and we're now segueing into gas here as well, because obviously you can't ignore the gas market, we will be facing a moment of truth, because the resolve of the Western European countries will definitely be put to the test if in the meantime they've not been able to build up stocks and secure supplies from elsewhere, and they're facing pressures from the winter. As far as the peak demand in the summer is concerned, I mean, I just spent a week in the south of France, and there is no signs whatsoever of reluctance of people to go out on holiday, move around, enjoy themselves, and spend money. There's a huge wave of pent-up demand as we've come out of lockdowns, so that people are now, for the first summer since 2019, have essentially got a free pass to enjoy themselves. And that'll be true to some extent in the United States as well. So these demand pressures, certainly in the short term at least, are going to build up, irrespective of where current prices may be. And that is going to store up some trouble probably for the end of the summer period as we move into winter. So yeah,
Neil, do I see any potential for actual shortages anywhere? We're seeing some reports in the northeast of the United States market that diesel could be jet fuel and so on.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're seeing it in various parts of the world. I just read in the press, I think this morning, about parts of Africa where there are shortages of products because their local refining industry isn't very efficient. You mentioned parts of northeast United States. There will be pockets of Western Europe as well, where the infrastructure, whether it be refining, pipeline, storage facilities, is not optimal, and they're not geared up to cope with periods of stress. So yeah, that is quite possible. And it's one of the factors that's affecting the aviation industry in Europe, leading to the cancellations. It's not just fuel prices, obviously, but it is a factor. But I suspect that we will essentially get through the peak summer demand season somehow or other. But the fundamental challenges, which is the cutoff of Russian supplies, the stress on the refining system, which we're seeing in major parts of the world, those stresses remain. And, just because there's a boycott on Russia, it doesn't mean that we've now settled down to a new era, as Mrs. Akbar was suggesting and Omar is suggesting. We're still in the early stages of adjusting to this.
Let's get the survey question up and give everybody a chance to comment on the outlook. Biden MBS rapprochement meeting would be bullish or bearish for prices. There was news overnight that the trip by Biden has been pushed into July now, the trip that meant to incorporate Israel and the region. So they've delayed it. I think the poker game, the chess game goes on into seeing what, I suppose, can they agree some kind of ground game ahead of that. Omar, looking to the week ahead, obviously it's Monday morning, as we started out saying. Oil prices on Brent and WTI as trading in Asia are up, negligible, a pop up 50 cents, but nonetheless on an upward motion on the back last week of the OPEC Plus decision to add more barrel, or at least to increase their quota. Do you take that declaration by OPEC as credible, given that they haven't been even meeting their existing quotas? Would you expect more supply to come from the OPEC Plus countries?
No. And OPEC basically just made it all like, it's window dressing, right? And, Biden going anywhere. I mean, I don't understand why people don't speak plainly, right? So this man has been, if you watch him, there's something that's not quite right. He needs whatever the word is, right? I've seen him shaking hand with ghosts. He doesn't know where he is. What's this man going to negotiate exactly? What's he going to do? Honestly,
he does have a large army of bureaucrats that do a lot of the negotiating for him. I mean, you can't obviously dismiss the whole of the U.S. government's ability to engage the world.
But this is the point. The point is, he's a leader, right? You follow the leader. If the leader doesn't know what day it is, what are the rest going to do? Basically make their own policy, blah, blah, blah. So in other words, what Mrs. Akbar was saying, if allies like Ukraine is the ally of the USA, right? And they helped them by sending them, a couple of missile launchers and a kit of, how to dig a hole and hide in it. What's the US going to do if forgive me, the shit hits the fan in the Middle East? What are they going to do? What are they going to do? Say like, don't worry, we're standing right behind you. We're going to make nice stories about you. The security guarantee of the US, as in Ukraine, has been shown to be not very useful. Same with NATO. People hide their heads in the sand and they pretend that they don't see the entire changes that are happening, but they're real and they're happening. And you can hide your head in the sand as much as you want. It's not going to change the outcome. Europe, the US, that kind of system that we had is all done. And you're going to see it basically, hopefully, come the winter. It's going to be fascinating to watch.
Sarah, you mentioned there that the region is in full production, or at least in the ability to add as many barrels as possible. Generally, the sense is that takes a bit of time. Your outlook for that, I mean, from the point of view of this cycle of demand, let's say before perhaps this doomsday recession kicks in, kicks everybody's door down at the end of the year or whatever it might be into next year. What is the outlook for increased capacity within the Gulf states in that period or over the short to medium term?
Well, Sean, in our business, normally it takes a cycle, the investment cycle is about from 3 to 5 years. So that's the kind of horizon we plan for, and the execution of major projects in order to bring capacity takes, even if you fast track them, it takes this kind of time. So all the plans in Saudi, 13 million, in UAE, 5 million, in Iraq, 6 million, in Kuwait, 4 million, it takes this kind of time horizon. So until we get to, not before 3 years. If there is serious capacity addition in any of these countries, there is plans and they are being executed, contracts are being let. So we do expect to have additional capacity, but it's not going to come before 3 years. So
is
that's
there, obviously, Sarah, you're in the oil services business, the supply chain business. Is there capacity there, or is there limits there? Obviously, you've had a difficult period over the recent years, but now obviously it's busy times again. Is there the supply chain and capacity there to meet all of this growth demand by the national energy companies of the Gulf?
Yeah. So the supply chain is there. However, I have to mention one thing: costs and inflation are high. So every barrel that you are going to develop at this point in time will cost you more, but at this price, just do it. So supply chain is there, ability to execute projects is there, because, for a while, like 3-4 years, most of these service companies were in limbo. They were not doing projects. They were not actually making money. But now it is their opportunities. They are all gearing up for this coming phase. Yeah. And their supply chain, and don't forget, technology actually development really helps a lot in many of the aspects we do in our business. So it's not the same like we used to do before, but anyway, even with this application of technology, even with the supply chain processes and procedures that we have in place, it is minimum 3 to 5 years before you see projects on the ground.
Let's get the survey result and give Neil the last word here this morning. So no difference, all of the pain and suffering of giving birth to a meeting between Biden and MBS and the general view, at least in this room, is, at least regarding the energy markets, the oil markets, it will be no different. And a small number think it actually will be bullish. Neil, your outlook for we're now going to be going forward into an accelerated tightening phase on the monetary policy side, the Fed to deliver another 50 basis points. The ECB have now shown their hand to start to get into the tightening cycle. Your thoughts on that over the summer and its potential impact on demand destruction, or not? As you said, the south of France will be busy regardless.
Well, they have to be very, very careful, because the fundamental causes of inflation that we're seeing now include the supply chain stresses that we're seeing as we emerge from COVID. Piled on top of that is the implications of the Russia-Ukraine war, and those issues are not going to be settled by central banks raising rates on consumers in their countries, sending mortgage rates higher, raising borrowing costs in domestic economies. That is not going to solve the fundamental problems that we've got in supply chains, the disruption of immigrant workers going back to their home countries, not coming back, and all the rest of it. So they have a very, very difficult balancing act indeed. There's nothing a central bank can do about the fundamentals of the oil market. It takes a long time for it to adjust. And, to some extent, I think, as Omar may have said on a previous time I was on this with him, I think it was him, is that we're also reaping the consequences of the loose monetary policy that we've seen since the financial crash at the end of 2008. So, they're facing a very, very difficult tightrope walk.
I think they've stepped across the Rubicon there and will be accelerating in their rate rises, at least as they've declared it. Their intention is to get inflation to 2%. That might take
Well, good luck with that.
a few 100 basis point moves, never mind 50. So get rid of all the debt you have. That would be the message. Omar, as always, thank you so much for sprinkling us with magic dust this Monday morning.
Thank
Sarah
you.
Akbar, as always, wonderful to have you. And Neil, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Oil prices, as we say, trading a little bit above 120 on Brent. Let's see where the week takes them. It all looks upward in its motion, even after little corrections. Will we ascend that towards 130? We'll see. All the best, everybody. Have a great